Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to another episode of The Ways We Move. This is a podcast that highlights mobility innovations coming to you right now, but mostly the people behind them and why do they do that. It's very important for me to understand that. I'm always curious about what makes people tick, what gets them out of bed in the morning. And so this is something that we strive to do on this podcast, is to not only show you new innovative solutions, but also who the people are. And it takes a lot for someone to usually walk away from a nice job to go, hey, I'm going to do a startup and embrace a new means of mobility. And then, of course, well, then you realize that you're not everything within a company. You might be good at engineering, at designing. You might be a great CEO. You might be a great founder. You might be a serial entrepreneur, but you're not good at everything, finances, etc., so on and so forth. So our guest today is a special friend of mine whom I'm working with on a few projects, and I can't wait to tell you when we'll be able to, in about a month or so, who is worked with NASA, has a PhD in aerospace, has designed already two types of eVTOLs, thrust only and then winged eVTOLs with the Spanish company Crisalian, called Crisalian, where they actually had a working prototype and then switched over and worked on a much bigger eVTOL prototype. But he also has another company, and that goes right back to startups. He has a company called Appbay, and that is a company that not only helps startups develop, but also execute what they should be doing. In other words, not just an incubator in the conceptual stages of its life, but also how does it work day to day. And that's really important because, as I mentioned before, entrepreneurs are not great CEOs usually, and vice versa. They need each other. They have an uneasy relationship with each other. And many times entrepreneurs will have sunk a business because they just didn't want to let go of that. And this is what Appbay does. Not that it will remove your business from you by all means, but it helps you shape a team, shape the idea, and then execute it, which I think is very important. And then the other thing, of course, is this education project that we're about to launch, hopefully in about a month or so. But in the meantime, we'll just talk about what Oscar has seen on his end of the spectrum, which is, of course, in Europe mostly, and the challenges of designing one type of eVTOL and then scratching it and doing for something totally different, even though they could have stretched it, but decided not to. So it's very interesting to understand the psyche behind that. Well, anyway, in the meantime, we'll let Oscar introduce himself, and we hope you like this. Again, like, subscribe, share, and tell us, has your understanding of AAM changed at all watching this video? Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to another episode of The Ways We Move. This is a podcast that highlights mobility innovations coming to you right now, but mostly the people behind them and why do they do that. It's very important for me to understand that. I'm always curious about what makes people tick, what gets them out of bed in the morning. And so this is something that we strive to do on this podcast, is to not only show you new innovative solutions, but also who the people are. And it takes a lot for someone to usually walk away from a nice job to go, hey, I'm going to do a startup and embrace a new means of mobility. And then, of course, well, then you realize that you're not everything within a company. You might be good at engineering, at designing. You might be a great CEO. You might be a great founder. You might be a serial entrepreneur, but you're not good at everything, finances, etc., so on and so forth. So our guest today is a special friend of mine whom I'm working with on a few projects, and I can't wait to tell you when we'll be able to, in about a month or so, who is worked with NASA, has a PhD in aerospace, has designed already two types of eVTOLs, thrust only and then winged eVTOLs with the Spanish company Crisalian, called Crisalian, where they actually had a working prototype and then switched over and worked on a much bigger eVTOL prototype. But he also has another company, and that goes right back to startups. He has a company called Appbay, and that is a company that not only helps startups develop, but also execute what they should be doing. In other words, not just an incubator in the conceptual stages of its life, but also how does it work day to day. And that's really important because, as I mentioned before, entrepreneurs are not great CEOs usually, and vice versa. You know, they need each other. They have an uneasy relationship with each other. And many times entrepreneurs will have sunk a business because they just didn't want to let go of that. And this is what Appbay does. Not that it will remove your business from you by all means, but it helps you shape a team, shape the idea, and then execute it, which I think is very important. And then the other thing, of course, is this education project that we're about to launch, hopefully in about a month or so. But in the meantime, we'll just talk about what Oscar has seen on his end of the spectrum, which is, of course, in Europe mostly, and the challenges of designing one type of eVTOL and then scratching it and doing for something totally different, even though they could have stretched it, but decided not to. So it's very interesting to understand the psyche behind that. Well, anyway, in the meantime, we'll let Oscar introduce himself, and we hope you like this. Again, like, subscribe, share, and tell us, has your idea, understanding of AAM changed at all watching this video? Thank you. Oscar, well, tell us a little bit more about you. Where are you from? What's your background? Tell us more.
Well, Nicolas, I'm an aerospace engineer, PhD. I've been working in the aerospace sector for many years. I've been working in the space sector with International Space Station, with NASA, with ESA. Then I set up with some colleagues a CubeSat startup here in Europe back in 2012, long time ago.
Yeah.
And then I moved into the finance sector. I was working then back to the aerospace world, manufacturing really big satellites in Iberespacio. And then I got into advanced air mobility and autonomous vehicles, ground vehicles with Crisalio, a Spanish startup. And now I'm working as the CEO of Appbay, a company in which we are working with aerospace companies in their growth journey. So this is basically my background and my life.
That's really interesting. I want to hear more about Appbay because you said something that's very important to help the early growth of companies. That's so important. There's such a very delicate transition between what an entrepreneur wants and what the realities of everyday business is. And I've seen that happen over and over again. So we'll get back to that. Tell us, before we get into your company, tell us a little bit of what got you into advanced air mobility.
Well, to be honest, this is kind of a strange story because in 2020, I started reading about advanced air mobility, eVTOL developments, first ideas, but I didn't pay too much attention about it. I was saying like, okay, this is just coming in the future, but I didn't think it was in the near future. But suddenly in 2022, I got a call from the founder of Chrysalium telling me, I want you on board. I want you to be the CEO of the company. And I was like, okay, wait a minute, exactly. What is this exactly about eVTOL? Because I have read a little bit, but I just want to zoom in a little bit and know more about what is this about. And we were talking for a while together, and I realized that it was really, really interesting, not only the eVTOL market, but also the project in Grisalio, because it also combined the ground mobility with autonomous vehicles and so on. So I said, yes, let's get in and let's try to move this industry forward together, because it's about changing lives. And this is what is important for me, changing lives and making society better for our children and for the people that are still to come to this world.
Yeah, well said. Actually, I'm so glad you said that because that's really is the motivation we more or less all share is to make it better, have more efficient, less polluting, so on and so forth, modes of mobility. So that said it really well. So at Crescelian, you developed, if I remember well, I heard you speak in Portugal. You said you developed the eVTOL. Tell us a little bit about that because your ramp up to the industry was a pretty steep ramp up, right?
Yeah, it was very, very steep because what we did was firstly we developed a technological demonstrator, and this was a different approach because we said, okay, let's go step by step, let's be pragmatic, and firstly we need to test the technology. We
Right.
had a proprietary technology called Fly Free, which we decided that we were going to work really, really hard because we thought that this was going to provide us with the highest stability for the aircraft in the market. And we thought this was a key factor in terms of, first of all, social acceptance. If people don't feel comfortable in the aircraft, in the eVTOL, they are not going to fly. Secondly,
No.
because this is going to let the aircraft fly in worse weather conditions, and this is key as well if we want to fly, provide a reliable, let's say, transport for society. And we decided to develop this technological prototype full scale. We started flying it in different locations under the European Commission projects, with CSAR projects as well. And then we said, okay, this is great. It has worked as expected, but we have to make a decision here. And it's an important decision because we can try to squeeze this prototype and take it to the market, okay? But we know it has lots of constraints because, for example, it didn't have a wing. So this meant that autonomy was limited, okay?
Limited.
So we have like this kind of performance that was limited as well in terms of number of passengers. It was for one passenger, we could increase it up to 2, 3, but we thought it was not enough for the market. So we decided to then to transition and start the design of the aircraft that was going to be commercialized, called Integrity. And the reason was because we knew very well that from a marketing perspective, maybe it was better and faster to take the technological prototype to the market and try to certify it. But in reality, exactly, you were not going to solve a real issue. And the objective is to solve a real issue. So we decided to, I wouldn't say a step back, because for me it's to step forward, starting a new aircraft, a commercial aircraft. And this was the beginning of the project, the end of one project, and the beginning of the other project in Crescelian.
Yeah, that's interesting that you're saying this because I think it's something that a lot of eVTOL makers have looked into is, thrust only or have some sort of wing component to, of course, raise the payload and the range and everything, and also the efficiency to a certain point. And it's interesting you should say that. I'm always intrigued when I look at SkyDrive. I think it's an amazing aircraft, and I love the team, and it has its own niche. If you think about it, it has a very specific niche, anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes, short hops with 2 people behind a pilot, and of course eventually autonomous. But it has a special niche, and I think it's perfect. And there are not a lot of players in that industry, so it's interesting that you guys decided to go full blown. Let's get more passengers, and of course better range and everything. So tell us a little bit about the challenges because, thrust only to a wing aircraft, that's a whole new ballpark.
Exactly. And one of the challenges was that you have to complete your mindset when you are working in prototype terms than when you are working in a certification process. Okay. To fly something in this industry is complex. Okay. But it's not that complex, let's say. Okay, the most complex thing is to have something that can be certified. Okay, and this is where the rubber meets the ground. So this is in reality where you have to take many constraints or many requirements, put them at the front of the design process. And this is really important. And this is my recommendation as well for people that are getting into this industry. Please take always the certification requirements right at the beginning, because maybe in a year, it will be too late. Okay, because then you have to start everything from scratch. Exactly, and very expensive.
That's very expensive. Yes,
exactly.
That's true.
And this is one of the most important things. They are complex because you also have to change the way how you work. For example, in Europe, you have the DOA, you have the POA certifications for the design teams, for the production teams. You need to put in place procedures. So it's not enough to have a good team working together because, yes, of course, this is a given. But on top of it, you need to put many things that sometimes as entrepreneurs, we may think that they are slowing us down. And sometimes
that's true.
We feel a little bit stressed out because it's like, no, I can go faster. If I couldn't do this like this, but please don't take shortcuts because otherwise the aircraft is not going to succeed. It's not going to be certifiable. And this is everything in this industry.
Yeah, and the last thing you want to do is tell your investors, you know what, we need another $1 million because guess what? Or 5 or 10 or $1 billion, whatever it is. Yeah, no, you aviation is slow. You know what is the adage? Yeah, it's a decade, 1,000 engineers, and $1 billion for one aircraft. Okay, let's remember that one, guys. So exactly. Interesting indeed. So I hear that you're still involved with Crisalion, but you've also moved on and you started another company, and that one I'm very interested about. Tell us a little bit more about Appbay. What do you guys do exactly?
Well, this is a project that was born of my own needs when I was C-level of different companies in the aerospace sector, because I realized that I wanted to have a company that could help me in my growth journey. So this means putting together finance, putting together business development, international expansions, and technology, understanding regulation, understanding the roadmaps, the certification, and everything depends on the other thing. Because, for example, you cannot create the technological roadmap without taking into account finance needs. How are you going to finance the whole project? And you need to iterate between the two parts. Where are you going to sell the product? How are you going to sell it? In which locations? So we decided to set up this company to work with companies, aerospace companies and technological companies as well, in these areas, not only as a consultancy firm, but also as an executive firm, okay? Because we also execute together with them, because sometimes to consult, let's say, is not the key aspect. The key aspect is to execute, okay? And this is usually where the problems come. So I think that it's a very, very nice industry. And we are working with companies in different sectors, not only advanced air mobility, okay, also conventional sector. And that you see as well, we have the opportunity to see how this, for example, airlines, we have a strong relation with airlines, how they are willing to adapt their new fleets to this transition. At the same time, they don't want to risk too much, but they know that they want something related to the new developments or of electrification, especially electrification, I would say, but also hydrogen. Yes. Of course. I couldn't say it currently that SAF is that innovative, but of course it's also part of the, let's say, sustainability mix.
It's a step in the right direction.
Exactly. But because we are already using it, okay, in our normal flights. And for example, one of my experiences as well is with MRO companies, CAMO companies, that they see this as a business opportunity. They need to see how to transition to this new sector. So it's kind of interesting to see the industry from different perspectives, how the different parts try to match together, okay, and how finally we will converge to a point in the future.
It's really interesting what you're saying, because it sounds like you're not only an incubator, but you're also a developer or even an executor, like somebody who executes the idea going forward. And it's interesting because I remember back in 2008, 2009, when we were thinking about EVs and what it meant and everything. Well, one of the things we thought of is, well, gosh darn it, where are they going to get repaired? So it's like, of course, you're going to go to your local mechanic's shop or the dealership. And then we realized the dealerships in the US were like, we don't like that. We don't know that. And of course, my first thought turned to, well, electricians, obviously, right? We need to work with people who understand electricity, or at least have that background and understanding, and then get them to go forward. So I like what you've done there. And I think you're right when it comes to MROs. There's most of the talent is already there. We don't really need all that much. The only thing we might need, people understand batteries, BMS systems, electric motors, I mean, all of that, but they already exist. They are already in the EV industry. They're more than happy to switch over. In fact, I've known a lot of people who have gone from 1 to 2 to 3 EV startups and now have jumped on the advanced air mobility industry, which I'm like, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a really great idea what you have there.
Yeah. One of the challenges that, for example, we see with MRO is that when we talk about eVTOL or electric aircraft that usually are constrained about range, okay, they usually cannot fly like 1,000 kilometers. Currently, we are talking about 100, 200, okay, not more. One of the key points here is to have an MRO system in which you can take care of the aircraft next to customers, okay? Because conventional aircraft can fly to a hub. For example, the hub can be, you can have 1, 2 hubs in a continent, 3, okay, and can fly and go there. But I think that when you're talking about eVTOLs and this kind of aircraft, you will require a more, let's say, decentralized MRO operation, because otherwise you are going to have problems in transporting the aircraft to the main MRO hub. You are going to waste time. If you waste time in this operation, your ticket price will go up, okay, because you have more downtime in the aircraft. And this means that you will not be able to, let's say, fulfill your mission, that is to provide cheap urban and regional mobility for everyone. And to do it, you need to have many flight hours per year for each aircraft. Okay, I think MRO goes at the heart of these challenges, and it has to be taken into account right at the beginning of the deployment of this kind of operations.
It is music to my ears what you're saying right now, because it's 7 years ago. I remember talking about that with a bunch of people, all stakeholders in the industry, and we were like, it's going to be really difficult designing what at the time we call them vertiport networks. Now we'll call them, advanced air mobility networks, whatever you want to call them, because ideally you want a big MRO in the middle of a big network, right? Which of course still means that, well, what happens if one of them is a brick and you can't move it, right? You need something that's small enough that they can work on it locally. And hence we had that idea of a, main MRO that would do more the overhaul part of it, but the maintenance and repair could be done more locally. So we had mini MROs and one big MRO. But here was the challenge. Sometimes networks are not just a big round, right? Sometimes networks are just a straight and slip like this. And in some of the networks that we were developing in Europe, actually, one of them was really the only MRO we could have put was way out at the end of the strip. And I thought, if anything happens in the north, I don't know how we're going to do that. Of course, we were next to the water, so we're thinking, all right, well, high-speed boats, which of course is another heavier infrastructure that we need to look into. It exists, but yeah, it was very tricky. On top of, wow, only 1 or 2 of these eVTOLs have wheels. Wow, it's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, we can move them, but 3 to 5 miles per hour is moving something that's slow, that's downtime. That's what are we going to do with this? So, and thankfully now we're working more with eSTOLs and eCTOLs, so that helps us have a much bigger impact and a bigger area of operations.
Yeah. No, so that's great. That's great.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So I'd love to hear more about that, and of course we'll continue talking about that for the future and everything.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about. I don't know can we say it? I heard that you're working on something that's really cool. Do we want to say a little bit about it, or not too much, or maybe tease?
Yeah, we can say
about it.
We can say a little bit, yes, because we are working on a new educational project, a new, let's say, educational approach to technology and to the aerospace world. We will have news coming in the coming months about it, and we will be very, very happy to be here with you, Nicolas, to share it together and to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm really excited because what you're putting, without saying anything, but what you're putting together is A, very much needed. B, you have the right people doing it, the right experts doing it, and C, I think it's also there's a big need for it because right now there's a lot of fluff in the industry, and it always happens like that. Disruptive technologies attract a lot of people. Those, like you and me, who just want the betterment of society. But yeah, it's human nature. You got a lot of people who just sort of slither in there and just want to make a lot of money. And sometimes when I see some of these education related either events or entities, I'm thinking, okay, interesting. So I think there's a dire need for this. So I'm excited to hear more about it. And I think in about a month or so, we'll come back and talk about it. So as usually, as we're getting into the podcast, we talk a little bit about the motivation. What is your motivation? What gets you out of bed in the morning, especially considering your background, which is very interesting because you have conventional aerospace, I mean, actually aerospace altogether, and now going into advanced air mobility. What gets you motivated? Why are you doing this?
Because I love to see things moving. And I think that currently we are in an industry where everything is moving very fast. And this was not happening 10 years ago.
No,
okay? And
not at all.
Everything is changing now. Everything. For example, the presence of governments in the main developments is being reduced. We are seeing it, for example, in the space sector. In the advanced air mobility sector, for example, we have seen as well the private companies pushing very, very hard to get it out.
Yes.
And we see that with the private sector coming in, things are moving very fast. I think every time when I see at the market, I say, okay, I think no one can really predict what the market is going to be in 20 years. And this is amazing. And I say, okay, I want to be part of it. And every time when I get up in the morning, I say, exactly, you have it there. Exactly. Exactly. And I think that it's amazing for us, the opportunity that we have, not only the people that are working in this sector, but society as a whole, because in reality, this is related to the whole society. If we talk about ground infrastructure,
yes,
it's about everyone, cities, how we move, how we can have better lives, how we can have more free time, more leisure time, because in reality, transport, most of the time is about moving faster, having more time for ourselves, and doing it cheaper, and of course, in a safe way. And we are solving a very basic problem in society, but with a lot of technology. And this is amazing. I think that it can really change the standard of living of people. And not only because of pollution. Yes, we talk about pollution a lot in the sector, but it's not only about that. It's a much more profound change that we are trying to make in the industry. And I think that this has to motivate all of us because we have the opportunity to radically change the way how we are moving in this world. And this is great, honestly.
Yeah, I think you said it very well. And I just one example. I live in Savannah, and I drove up to Atlanta. It used to take me north of Atlanta in Roswell. It used to take me 3.5 hours, maybe 4 hours at most. Well, it took us 6 hours to get there because more and more people are moving into Atlanta and everything. And now you kind of have to tip your hat to the designers of the highway systems in the 1940s, right? It still works more or less today. But you're right, it's very finite, and it's only going to get worse. And cars are getting heavier, more bloated, bigger. And so we get to the point where, well, let's just start to wrangle in other modes of transportations and mobility. We recently had Clint Harper on the podcast, and he talked about the importance of also giving airports a second breath, which, funnily enough, is what they were supposed to do in the beginning. You know, they started out as training centers here in the US for the military, but they were also supposed to be this regional hub. And of course, using aviation, but also where cars could come in, trains could come in, and then you could fly much further and everything. So I think you're right. Advanced air mobility offers that possibility of moving faster, more efficiently, less pollution, less noise, and yeah, for those of you who are scared about safety, way more safer than any other modes of transportation right now. Or as what was it, Archer mentioned something I thought was brilliant: no single point of failure. And that's something to be said, right? Because the best case scenario is we have 2 points of failure on most of the airplanes we fly on. So it's pretty amazing. Yeah, it's a good motivation to have. I'm sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say that at the same time, I would like to be also realistic and pragmatic, saying, okay, this is a vision that we have. This is a mission that we have as, I would say, not only as a sector, but as a society. We want to change the way how we move. We want to open the third dimension in a, let's say, in a sustainable way. And by sustainability, I don't refer only to pollution. I also refer to being comfortable. The surroundings of the city, people that live in the city have to be comfortable with having this kind of mobility. This is the real challenge, I think, that we have. We have lots of challenges. Batteries, of course, this is a challenge, but it will come, okay, sooner or later, because we are seeing that they already have a certain level of performance. They have already gone through a certain threshold. Okay, this is great. Yes. But we still need to work a lot about run infrastructure, MRO, insurance, social adoption, and this is something that the industry cannot do alone. And this is very important to be aware of it. So the speed of the sector is going to be the speed of the slowest one. And this is very important to keep it in mind.
Yes,
and sometimes I think that as companies, we may think that, okay, we can do everything alone, we can do everything by ourselves. But in this case, no, we need to put everyone in the same forum, in the same table. Try to bring solutions and interfaces that are compatible. Because I think that the biggest challenge that we have is that there are many, many requirements that this kind of industry needs to satisfy. This is also beautiful because it's something really interesting to do. And we have, people talk a lot about, for example, about legislation, regulation. Yes, but this is only one piece of the whole challenges that we have had. So my message is, okay, this is a really beautiful industry, the one related to advanced air mobility, electrification, new developments. We could also talk about, for example, supersonic and so on, not only regional mobility, also about, there are many things happening. But at the same time, it's good to focus on technology, but we also should focus on the rest of the elements, on society, because otherwise this is not going to succeed.
Yeah, and I think so. 2 things that you said. First of all, I want to give you a medal because you said change the ways we move. Oh, brilliant. but also you highlighted something that in the infrastructure part of the industry, that's something we've been very cognizant about, is it's not a one team does it all. And sometimes I feel like some eVTOL makers are a little bit too, we're going to do it all by ourselves. It's like, yeah, congratulations, but you're still going to need to lend somewhere sometime. And you're right. We've, even years ago, 6-7 years ago, we thought about, we need to talk to the fire marshal because we're going to design something and the fire marshal is going to say, sorry, that door is not just right. Wow, there's another $50,000 into everything, redesigns and everything. And we were early on talking to, the police, law enforcement, EMS, ambulance, fire protection, and to make sure that these guys had a say at it. And fast forward today, I was at the Augusta Regional Airport here where we're planning on something interesting. And guess who was sitting next to me? The ATC person responsible for Augusta, the fire person responsible for the airport. And I was thinking, hallelujah, this is really wonderful. But so you're right, it is an integrative approach. It's a holistic approach to this industry. It doesn't. And we did the same thing, by the way, with EVs, right? Back then, we thought, oh, the car is so cool, so great. And then all of a sudden, we're like, uh-oh, where do they plug? And it's the same thing with us. So yeah, whereas with EVs we had a very two-dimensional problems, over here we have a four-dimensional problem that we're trying to solve, including a lot of people that need to come to the table, and they are coming to the table. So you said it very well. I wanted to highlight that. Is there anything you would like to add to those people listening to us? We have about 5 minutes left. Those people listening or watching us, is there anything you want to tell them? And then also, where can they reach out to you? Because I'll try to make sure that it's included somewhere here.
No, I just want to tell them that we are living a unique moment in our lives, because as I have said, we are now talking about advanced air mobility, but many other developments are happening at the same time in aerospace. As I have said, we have new supersonic projects like the one of Boom, for example. We are also seeing in the defense sector the sixth generation of the new jets coming in. We are seeing as well the new developments in drones. Not only, I would say that, of course, when you see it physically, the hardware part is really interesting. Okay, you see it and you say, wow, this is great. But the biggest, let's say, developments that we are seeing as well are in the software side. And I think people are going to be amazed by the great capabilities that are being implemented in this kind of systems. At the same time, we are seeing, for example, in space, how new launchers are coming in, how new constellations for communications are coming in. These are critical, for example, for advanced air mobility, because we need good satellite communications. So we need to have better constellations. We need to have launchers to launch them. So the industry, as I said, is a whole. So I think that now we are in a very unique moment in which we are seeing things speed up. So what I would recommend everyone is to get interested in this industry, because I think that if we work all together and we keep pushing, I could remove frontiers, I could remove countries. Okay, let's forget about it. If humanity as a whole, we can work together, all the companies, all our brains in this kind of problems, this is exponential. This is exponential. We are not talking about a linear problem here, which every day we just increase the same size. This is exponential. So this means that in a few years, or in 20 years, for me, 20 years is few compared with the age of humanity. Okay, in 20 years, we can have something radically different. And we have the technology, we have the brains, but we have to put this ecosystem together, working together, and try to let's say, take everyone into account in this process. Okay, society, people that are living in cities, and make them part of it. Okay, because this is the only way, I think, how we are going to be able to go forward.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly well. It's not a cliche to say that we are living a once in a lifetime revolution, and it's in mobility. And I think, our grandchildren are going to be like, wow, it's incredible. You used to put dinosaur poop in cars and airplanes. Interesting. So, but thank you, Oscar. Thank you for this first appearance. And notice I said first appearance, because there will be many more where you will come back. I love your dynamism, your enthusiasm, and you make a fun place to work. So I look forward to our next discussion, and then our next reveal.
Exactly. I look forward to it, Nicolas, for the next times, and thank you very much for having me here. It has been a truly a pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. And so to our watchers and listeners, let us know, what do you think about advanced air mobility? What do you think about the possibilities going forward? What do you like and subscribe, by the way? That's the most important thing. Like, subscribe, but also give us your comments so that we better understand what you understand or what you would like to hear about. And maybe if these discussions are changing your mind about what we're doing, because we want to move away from public acceptance to public desirability. Frankly said, when I see an eVTOL fly or an eSTOL or anything, I think it's freaking cool. I want one, of course, right? So we want to hear your thoughts, and we'll be back again next week, same time, same channel. And in the meantime, you spoke to Oscar Lara, who is a dear friend of mine and somebody who's really making big waves in the industry. Thanks, Oscar.
Thank you very much, Nicolas.